Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and this is podcast episode number 28. Welcome back to the channel. As I said, my name is Michaela and I'm a knitter from Dublin, Ireland. I have no preamble for today's episode, so I will take that opportunity to mention my yarn shop directory, which I've linked in the description box below. It's always linked in the description box. And if you're new or if you're not familiar already, my yarn shop directory is basically a list of yarn shops in Europe that stock more popular European brands like Knitting for Olive, Isager, Sandnes and that also ship to mainly Ireland, but if they ship to Ireland, they probably ship to other EU countries as well, and other countries in Europe, but not necessarily in the EU. So it could be applicable to more knitters outside of Ireland, but my initial aim was to make it available to Irish knitters because a lot of those brands are difficult to get in person in Ireland. I don't think there's anywhere in Ireland that stocks Knitting for Olive or Isager. There's only one or two shops that stock Sandnes or Filcolana, so that was my aim with making that directory, but it would be helpful to a lot of knitters in mainland Europe as well. And that is the only bit of admin that I will mention in today's episode, so we'll get straight into what I'm wearing, which is also my first finished object. I wasn't too warm when I put this on, and I'm still not too warm right now, but that might not last. We'll see. I might not be able to keep this on. This is my Dagmar zipper sweater, which is a pattern by Petite Knit. This pattern was gifted to me by a viewer, so thank you so much for that. I got so much enjoyment out of it, and I'm always so grateful to receive patterns from you guys, especially one that was already on my wish list, so huge thank you. I absolutely love this project. It was a labour of love. It took me about 5 months to make and it was well worth the effort. I knit mine in the recommended yarn, which is Hjellholz Uldspinderi Hjellholz Triple in the colour charcoal. It's a 100% wool and it's a Danish wool, so it's sourced from their farm, and it also has a bit of Falkland merino in there as well. I knit the size small and I knit mine on the recommended needle size as well, which is a 4.5mm needle, with the exception of the ribbing, which I did on a 3.5mm needle. So I have finished and blocked this. Actually, my last episode I had finished it and it was on the blocking mat, so I'm really excited to finally show it to you all. And once I blocked it, I was looking at it, admiring it. I was really happy with it. I thought it looked great. And there was one evening last week where it was actually a bit chilly in the house, so I decided to put this on. It was really cozy. And I noticed when I was wearing it that it was it just didn't look right around the ribbing. And kind of only from the perspective of when I was looking down, I could see that the ribbing was kind of bulging out at the front. I even took a picture in the mirror and I didn't notice the bulging in the ribbing until I was just wearing it. And then every time I looked down, I was like, why is that sticking out at the front? And I was like pushing it back in and it was just sticking back out. And I realised that it was just bulging in the area where that honeycomb panel is in the middle of the jumper. And so I measured my gauge, and my gauge for the honeycomb panel is what it's supposed to be according to the pattern. It's 24 stitches and 10 centimetres. But my gauge for the ribbing was 18 stitches and 10 centimetres, which is considerably bigger, and made complete sense why it was bulging. Because it's the same number of stitches in the honeycomb panel compared to that portion of the ribbing. So obviously the ribbing is then going to flare out if the gauge is bigger. So for those of you who say that you love when I do maths on my channel, buckle in, because this was a big one. I wrote all of my notes, scribbled all of my notes down on these flashcards basically. What have I got? So I'm going to read this off the page because I won't be able to remember all these numbers. My ribbing gauge was 19.5 stitches and 10 centimetres. My jumper, the body of my jumper, measured 104 centimetres around. And I wanted my ribbing, obviously, to be 104 centimetres or less because I didn't want my ribbing to be bigger than the jumper. So I aimed for a ribbing that was 100 centimetres in circumference, which at my gauge would have been 195 stitches. That meant that I needed to decrease by roughly 30 stitches, which I divided into front and back because I assumed I would be doing 15 in the front, 15 in the back. As for the other components of the body, my seed stitch gauge was 16 stitches and 10 centimetres, so the ribbing was tighter than that, so that's good. My gauge for the diamond panel was 18 stitches, so just slightly tighter than the ribbing, which again, that should be fine. So it really was just the honeycomb pattern that was throwing it off at 24 stitches, again, compared to 19.5 stitches for the ribbing. So I figured I would have the best success if I put all of the decreases where I needed them the most. In other words, the honeycomb panel. However, if I put all 15 decreases just below that honeycomb panel, I'd have to decrease every 2 or 3 stitches, which is just too much. So I decided to spread them out across the entire cabled panel, which meant that I had to decrease every 6 stitches, which was a lot more reasonable. So I didn't put any decreases at the side of the body, basically where the seed stitch panel is. I don't know if that was a wise decision. I don't know if I was overthinking it, but it was already cinching in a little bit at the side where the seed stitch panel was. So I was quite happy with that. It was just cinching in at the side and then bulging out in the front. So I figured I did really need those decreases under the cable panels. I had also measured the width of those panels. So from the start of one diamond panel to the end of the other, it was 43 centimeters, but the equivalent ribbing section, given the larger gauge, was 47 centimeters. So it made complete sense why it was flaring once I had those numbers in front of me. And so I knew that I needed the ribbing section to be 43 centimeters or narrower. After my decreases, the ribbing panel that was, again, just from the start of one diamond panel to the end of the other would be 79 stitches. And according to my gauge, that would bring it to 40 centimeters, which again is narrower than the 43 centimeters that this panel was on the body. Am I making any sense? It all made sense when I was writing it down. Basically, I just decreased the ribbing only under the cable panel so that it would be smaller in width than the equivalent portion in the body so that it didn't flare out. Okay, I probably overcomplicated that as usual, but anyway, it worked out. I'm really happy with it. So it did mean having to unpick tubular bind off and undo all of the ribbing, which I wasn't looking forward to, but when I was filming the last episode, I was like, I'm definitely showing this on the next episode. Like, I had no issues with it. I didn't think there was going to be any issues. So the fact then that I did have an issue and I was like, oh God, I just want to like show this on the podcast. I think having this podcast is a really good motivator for me to finish projects, because if I didn't have that, this probably would have sat in a bag waiting to be fixed. Maybe around Christmas time I would have gotten around to fixing it. So the fact that I knew that I wanted to show it on the podcast was a huge motivator to actually undoing that tubular bind off, undoing the ribbing and reknitting it. And yeah, I'm really happy with the outcome now. Once I finished it, I did just kind of throw it in a pile. I know, very bold. And I just put it on now. So it does look a bit funny around parts of the ribbing, but I don't think that's anything to do with the ribbing and my decreases. I think it's more to do with the fact that it's just a little bit creased, and now that I'm wearing it, it should just relax out and look really good. So in terms of my yarn usage, I had 9 skeins as recommended by the pattern, and I only dipped into the 8th, so I have nearly 2 full skeins left, which is quite a lot. So I'm going to destash those somehow, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. This yarn is very rustic. It did soften after blocking, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're sensitive to itchy wools. I can wear it against bare skin, but I can feel the prickliness, but I don't necessarily feel a need to itch. You know, I can feel the little hairs against my skin. I don't mind that too much, but obviously if you are sensitive to wool, this probably wouldn't be a great fibre to use. I did find the yarn a bit difficult to work with. It tended to get stuck on my fingers when I was tensioning it, so I probably overkill a bit when it comes to tension. I tend to wrap my yarn around my pinky finger and then my ring finger and then kind of over my index finger. And yeah, it was just kind of getting stuck and I wasn't able to move it through my fingers. And loosening it up wouldn't be a problem, except that it was, because then it was too loose and I couldn't get a good grip on it. So I did kind of find it difficult to work with in that sense. I still like it. I think it was worth pushing through, but I wouldn't have any strong desire to work with it again, but I also wouldn't rule out working with it again. So yeah, I am really, really happy with this. It was a labour of love. This was a buddy knit with Ode from Baubles and Berries, which I've mentioned a few times. So that was so much fun. Just having someone to kind of bounce back and forth with whenever we had similar problems or we reached the same milestone at the same time. It was just really, really nice to have someone to talk to about this project. And she finished hers before me as well, only like a week or two I think before me, but that really motivated me to finish because obviously it's a buddy knit and I wanted to have mine finished as well. So yeah, I don't know if I would have got this done as quickly if I didn't have someone to knit it with. It was just a really nice experience and I would do it again. One more thing I forgot to mention is that I did spit splice this yarn together. I don't actually spit on it. I think it's a little bit gross, but I just used a bit of water to join the yarns together whenever I joined in a new skein. And so I had very few ends to weave in at the end, which was really nice. I don't spit splice often enough, I don't think, because I don't always use superwash wool, so I could spit splice more often, but I just don't for some reason. But yeah, this is kind of shown me the benefits of doing it because I had hardly any ends to weave in once it was done. So that is my Dagmar zipper sweater, finally finished, and yeah, I'm really happy with it. My next finished object is my Alpine Bloom tee, which is a pattern by Caitlin Hunter. The yarn that I used for this was Filcolana Arwetta in light truffle for the main colour and pigment and ply, I can't remember the base, but it was either their sock base or 100% merino base. I think it was their sock base. And the colour is Honeyed Cakes and 2 coins. I started off knitting this in a size 2, but by the time I finished the yoke, I realised my gauge was way off. So I had to make some considerable modifications to the stitch count to get it to fit me, but it worked out pretty well in the end. I'm really happy with the fit. I also got loads of compliments when I last showed this. I think loads of you loved the colour choices, which I'm obviously very happy about. So thank you so much for sharing your enthusiasm about that. It's always nice to know that people really like your colour choices. It makes me feel like I made the right decision, because I tend to overthink when it comes to colour choices, and yeah, it's just really nice to get everyone's compliments on this. I knit the colourwork on 4mm needles and the body on 3.5mm needles. And I did talk about my gauge issues the last time I mentioned this, but one thing I forgot to mention was that I didn't actually swatch the colourwork, which was a really silly decision. And in the past, when I have done colourwork projects, I have swatched the colourwork. And I've always based my needle size on my colourwork gauge. But for some reason with this, I decided to swatch just the plain stockinette, which was just a bad decision on my part. I don't know why I did that. And that's why I think I ended up with a lot of the gauge issues that I did. Having said that, I'm much happier with this gauge than I was with the gauge indicated in the pattern, which by the way is 24 stitches and 10 centimeters, whereas my gauge was closer to 27 stitches. Being a fingering weight yarn, for me 24 stitches was just a little bit too open, and I wasn't sure that I would be completely comfortable with it, but I decided to go ahead anyway and see how it went. But ultimately, when I finished the colourwork yoke and I realised my colourwork gauge was actually about 27 stitches, I figured I should also go down to a 27 stitch gauge for the main colour, but that I would need to increase the number of stitches in the body to get it to fit. So all of that is detailed in episode 26. I didn't actually show it in episode 27, but if you're interested, it is in episode 26. And I've also included my notes on how I modified that in my Ravelry project page, which I'll link below. So since the last time I showed this, I finished it, which means that I worked the hem, I bound it off, and then I worked the cuff. So I'll talk about both of those, but first, the hem is a very short 1x1 rib. It's only about 5 rounds, I think, before tubular bind off. And once I finished it, it was immediately like flipping up, and I was kind of bothered. Actually, I was very bothered by it. I didn't like it at all. And I did some Reddit research, and a lot of people were saying that a short rib just does that. And to fix it, you need to either go down a needle size or decrease the number of stitches. I already had gone down a needle size. I knit the body on 3.5mm needles and I did the ribbing on 2.5mm needles. So I went down quite a bit, and I didn't really want to go down any more because I thought it might hurt my hands. So I was kind of accepting the fact that I might have to undo the ribbing, decrease the number of stitches and redo it. One thing I did before blocking was I went in with a needle to adjust the tension on my tubular bind off, just to tighten it up, because I thought that that would help as well. And it did, but it was a bit of work, but it did help a lot, and most of the ribbing flattened out. There was one part at the back which was still flipping up quite a lot, and I was resigning myself to the fact that I might have to undo the ribbing, decrease the stitches and redo it. But I decided to block it first anyway, and actually blocking did flatten out that piece that was flipping up. I don't trust it. I actually don't think it's going to last, but I'm going to wear it until it does flip up and then I'll redo it. But for now, it's actually fine. You can see there's not really any flipping up here. As I said, I don't trust it. As for the cuffs, it took me a while to find the motivation to do these, and that's because you have to cast on from the bottom of the cuff, work this piece from like the bottom up, and then you graft it to the sleeve. And I just couldn't find the motivation to do that cast on, and I just kind of wanted to be able to work it from the sleeve down, but that's not the way the pattern's written. So eventually I did get around to doing it. I cast on with a long tail cast on. You can see that, you know, this curved lace pattern, it's actually curving a little bit here, or curling up a bit. It was a lot more prominent the first time I did this. So as I said, I used a long tail cast on, and I thought maybe the cast on was a little bit tighter compared to the rest of the knitting, and that was what was causing it to curl up. I did block it and it didn't help, so I redid it using a German twisted cast on, which definitely improved it, but it is still curling up a bit. So I've kind of accepted that the curling is going to happen regardless of what cast on I use. For me, a German twisted cast on always fixes any tension issues that are caused by a long tail cast on being tighter than the rest of the knitted fabric. So the fact that the German twisted cast on didn't help in this instance, I kind of just accepted that that's just the way it is. And yeah, so I worked the cuff. I don't think I did as many lace repeats as the pattern calls for. I think I did 6 instead of 8, and then I grafted it to the sleeve. Grafting it was definitely a bit fiddly, but I think it was worth the effort. I really like this lace cuff. There is an option in the pattern to just do a 1x1 cuff, the same as the hem, but I just really like this effect, and I like the way it complements the neckline lace as well. Once I grafted it, the underarm area was actually looking really messy. There was also a lot of ends to weave in at that underarm area, so I used those ends to kind of close any of the holes and the gaps that were caused from grafting the cuff to the sleeve. It's not perfect, it still looks a bit untidy, but it looks good enough to me, and also it's under the arm, so nobody's going to be looking. One thing that I kind of found difficult with this project was, again, in relation to the gauge. So I've used Filcolana Arwetta before, but I've used it in socks, and my gauge would be between 32 and 36 stitches, which is considerably tighter than the 27 stitches that I was knitting at for this pattern. And I found that at this gauge, the stitches were a lot more slippery. And I say stitches because I don't think the yarn itself is slippery, but just at this gauge, I found that, you know, the stitches didn't have the same kind of tension with adjacent stitches that they would have if they were knit at a tighter gauge. And so number one, I found it difficult to weave in ends because I had to weave my yarn in 2 or 3 different directions to make sure that it was secure, and that just doesn't look very pretty. I tried to do it in such a way that it wasn't visible on the outside, but it did become difficult with the lace cuff because obviously with the lace there's not really a lot of area in the first place to weave in your ends, and so trying to weave in my ends in a way that was secure but also couldn't be seen from the outside was very difficult for me. The other thing I found difficult was doing the 2-bitter bind off and also grafting the cuff to the sleeve, because I found that it was way too easy to accidentally pull the yarn too tight, and I'd had to go back in multiple times with a needle to try and manually readjust my tension so that those parts of the t-shirt weren't too tight. And the last thing I found that in places where I had joined a new ball of yarn and I had those extra tails hanging down on the inside of the t-shirt, they would get caught on things really easily, or not even get caught. It was very, very easy for those to be accidentally pulled, maybe when I was taking the t-shirt out of my bag or just moving it from one place to another. And I would end up with a big row of really, really tight stitches that I had to go back in with a needle to manually fix. These were just minor inconveniences, and I've never knit a fingering weight woolen garment at this gauge, I don't think. I have used fingering weight yarns at this gauge, but they've been cotton yarns, and I feel like it's not as slippy. Whereas with this, I did find it quite slippy, and I think it's just something that I should keep in mind going forward. It wouldn't stop me from doing it again, but it's something maybe I should just be a little bit mindful of. So yeah, that is my Alpine Bloom by Caitlin Hunter, and I love it. And for what it's worth, I consider myself a bit of a, not a pure beginner, but maybe like an advanced beginner when it comes to colour work. Like, I'm not too confident with colour work. Maybe I'm intermediate with colour work, but I'm not too confident. It's probably, of all the knitting techniques that I know, it's probably the one I'm least confident in, and I really enjoy this pattern. So if you find yourself in the same boat and you're wondering about this pattern, I can recommend it. My next finished object is a pair of socks, and this is also a new cast on since the last episode, which might be my fastest ever pair of socks. I don't think I've ever knit a pair of socks this quickly, but I just had so much fun with these because, as you can see, they are self-striping. I love how these turned out. So happy with them. I did mention them in my last episode as an upcoming plan. I think I cast them on that day. So yeah, these took just under 2 weeks to make. I was just addicted, completely addicted. So anyway, the yarn is from Mud Punch, who is a Canadian self-striping yarn dyer, and the colour is called Rock the Float. It's a 4-stripe repeat, blues, yellows, creams, you can see that. And then for the heel, I used a mini from a sock set from a homespun house. So I can't remember the name of the mini, but I think the sock set was called Keepsake. I did use that mini in that sock set, but I had about 9 grams left, so I just used that for the heel. So I cast on 64 stitches and I worked a 2x2 rib cuff. I aimed for 20 rounds, but I did want to finish the cuff at the end of a stripe, so I think I actually did 19 rounds. And actually, let me just talk about the yarn management, because I did split the 100 gram skein into 2 50 gram balls. So I wound up the skein into a 100 gram cake. I put that on my weighing scale, and then I wound off 50 grams. And I then, once I had the 50 grams, I just kept winding until my second ball started at the light blue colour so that I could start both socks at the same colour. And so I started knitting my cuff on my second sock, and I realised, you can kind of see it there, this is my second sock. I realised that the dark blue colour was coming up a lot quicker than on the first sock. So I think I got about 5 rounds of the light blue before the dark blue came up here. Whereas with this one, I think I got like 7 rounds. So very minor difference, but I didn't want I had already worked my cuff on the first sock and I had finished it at the end of the white stripe, and I didn't want the yellow to go into my cuff on the second sock. So I just stopped this cuff at the end of the white stripe anyway. So basically this cuff on the second sock is a little bit shorter than the first sock, but it's very unnoticeable. I think it's like shorter by 2 rounds or something, so it's not a big deal. And then I knit 60 rounds for the leg. So I kind of did these 2 at a time. Like I had them on 2 different 9-inch circulars, but I worked like the leg of one sock and then I did the leg of the second one, that kind of thing. So I was working the leg of the first sock and I was working my typical 64 stitches, and I realized it looked really big and I didn't know why, but I think this is going to be too big, especially when I block it. I haven't blocked these yet, but I had a feeling that they would grow when blocked. So I ripped it back to the cuff and I did some decreases to bring the stitch count down to 56. So the cuff is still 64 because it's so elastic that it still hugs my leg. But the leg at 64 stitches in the stockinette would have been too big. So I went down to 56 and I knit that for 60 rounds. Or I think I aimed for 60 rounds, but I told myself to at least finish whatever colour stripe I was on. I think the 60 rounds did coincide pretty much exactly with the end of the dark blue stripe, which was perfect. And then I followed the Earth Tones Girl tutorial for a shadow wrap heel. And yeah, then I just continued. So I did add a few increases before the shadow wrap heel, and I used Roxanne Richardson's heel size. I can't remember what she calls it. It's like customizing your heel size to make it fit. And so I always follow that tutorial whenever I'm doing a shadow wrap heel, because if I didn't add any increases, it would be too tight around my instep because I have a very high instep. One thing that I probably should have done was, after the shadow wrap heel, I decreased back down to 56 stitches. And because I have a high instep, I think I should have kept it at, I think my stitch count at that point would have been 62. Yeah, 62. Anyway, I should have kept it at 62 and decreased to 56, maybe like 1.5 inches down the foot. Now they do fit. They're a little bit snug around my instep, but not uncomfortable, and definitely still wearable. But just for an even better, more perfect fit next time, I think I will leave the stitch count as is after the shadow wrap heel and just decrease about 1.5 inches down the foot instead. The fact that I had to go down to 56 stitches for the leg was just interesting to me because I've only ever done 64 stitches. However, I have noticed the odd pair of socks I've knit that have turned out too big after blocking. So I don't know if my tension with sock knitting has changed or if it's to do with the yarn, because this yarn has a structure that I've never used before in a yarn. And I didn't realise it until I started knitting with it, and I thought it felt a bit strange and I couldn't really put my finger on it, but it was very round. Like the individual strand of yarn is very, very round and you can barely see the plies. But I decided to pull it apart a bit, and it's actually a 4-ply yarn, but each of the 4 plies is itself a 2-ply. So I just thought it was so unusual, and I looked it up, and apparently it's called cabled yarn. I'm assuming it's good for structure because it's going to have 4 strands of yarn that are themselves a 2-ply, like a 2-ply twisted strand. So I feel like that should add a bit of structural integrity to the yarn, which is really interesting. But I did find it kind of unusual to work with. I couldn't really get into a rhythm of knitting. There was a bit more tension in my hands. I found that I would knit maybe 5 or 6 stitches and then I would have to readjust my stitches on the needle anyway, but I would just take that opportunity to kind of open my hand a bit and stretch it out, because I was kind of naturally tensioning my hand a lot more when I was using this yarn for some reason. I don't know why. It just didn't seem to glide as smoothly along my needles as other sock yarns have. However, I would absolutely work with it again. I love the colours, and I do have another sock yarn from Mud Punch. It's a Christmas colourway that I'm really excited to use as well. So by no means does it put me off using this yarn again. I also realised that this colourway matches the knit along theme that I'm doing with my knitting group, and I talked about it in the last episode, and I'll talk about it when I go into whips as well. But it's just a happy coincidence that this colourway matches the knit along theme. And speaking of the knit along, I will move on to whips. And my first project that I'm going to talk about is my Thru Lines shawl, which is a pattern by Andrea Maury. This pattern was also gifted to me by a viewer, so thank you so much to the person who sent me this pattern. It was next on my queue, so that was a very nice little surprise in my inbox. I'm using 3 different yarns for this. The blue one is from Happy Go Knitty, which is a New Zealand based yarn dyer, and it's a merino silk yak base, and the colour is Emerald Lake. The yellow colour is Kremka Soul Wool. This one here is Kremka Soul Wool Edelweiss Alpaca 4-ply in the colour Honey. And the colour changing yarn, which I don't know if you can even see it on camera, well, you kind of can. This is a spin cycle dyed in the wool in the colour Miss Rumphius, which I also got in New Zealand, and it was a shop exclusive colourway for Lupine, which is a yarn shop in Auckland. I'm knitting this on 3.25mm needles, and I don't know what the gauge is for the pattern. I didn't do a gauge swatch, but I'm pretty happy with how it's working up. I don't really have much to say about this because in the last episode I did talk about it, although I didn't have it to show. I had started it with a different colour replacing the solid yellow colour, and I didn't like it, so I'd frogged it back. And so I've since restarted it, and I've been working away, and I'm really happy with how it's looking. I definitely think I made the right decision in switching out the green colour for the yellow. I feel like the colour changing in the spin cycle is a lot more prominent. You can see there it goes from pink to purple kind of colour. It's still not the most prominent thing you see when you look at this scarf at first, but it definitely is more noticeable than when I had the green colour instead of the yellow. I really did feel like the green was the only thing that you could see. It was like the star of the show, whereas I wanted the spin cycle to be the star of the show. As for the knit along, I'll just briefly recap because I did talk about it more in the last episode. In my knitting group, we're doing a knit along where we all knit something based on a painting, and the painting is of St. Stephen's Green, which is a park in Dublin City Centre, in autumn. So we just decided to pick some colours from the painting and knit something with those colours. So I think my scarf goes really well with the painting. I'm really happy with the colours that I chose. So yeah, I've been working away on this and I'm really enjoying it. I think the spin cycle yarn keeps me motivated because obviously it's colour changing, so I keep wanting to see what it looks like when I get to the next colour. I'm particularly excited to get to those pinks on the inside of the ball. I don't know if the pattern actually calls for that much yarn to be used. I would really like to use this whole ball. I don't think the pattern calls for that much, but I don't know what I would do with leftovers of this. So what I will do is I'll just knit the scarf as instructed by the pattern in terms of the number of increases that I'm supposed to do, and then I'll weigh this yarn and see how much I have left, and if I'll try and figure out how big the scarf will be if I use the whole ball. And yeah, if it will be comically large, I won't do it, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. One small thing that I really like about this pattern is that there are instructions for carrying up the yarn through the I-cord, which is a integrated I-cord. So you can't see at all that I'm carrying up the yellow and the spin cycle yarn on the wrong side here. It's completely hidden within the I-cord, which I really like. And I don't think the instructions are in the pattern themselves, but there is a video tutorial on Andrea Maury's YouTube channel for that. So that's what I followed for that. And yeah, I'm really happy with this. My next whip is another Andrea Maury slip stitch triangular shawl, and it's the Nightlight shawl. This one is a lot simpler than the Thru Lines shawl, being that it's only 2 colours and the pattern is just a lot simpler and easier to memorise. The yarn that I'm using is once again yarn that I got in New Zealand. It's brush tail upcycled merino possum yarn, which is 80% merino, 20% possum. The red colour is just the colour red, and the darker burgundy colour is called Firefly. I had started working on this in the last episode. I think I hadn't got much of it to show, but I had started it at least, and I've really enjoyed working on this. It's probably been my favourite project over the last couple of weeks to work on. It's not mindless by any means, but it's rhythmic and repetitive, so it's just been a really nice project to work on, and the yarn is so soft. I am blown away by how soft this yarn is, and people told me in the last episode that it would get softer with blocking, so I'm so excited to block it and see how it turns out. I only have one increase left to do as part of the increasing portion of the shawl before I start the decreases. However, I am going to put this aside for a little bit because I need to cast on 2 projects like next week, and that will bring me up to 5 whips, which is just too many, and this is the one that I can afford to put away for a couple of weeks. This is going to be for my boyfriend. I don't know if I'm going to like give it to him for a special occasion like Christmas, or we usually celebrate our like anniversary of when we started dating at the end of October, so I'll probably have it done before then and I can give it to him then. But yeah, it only took me 2 weeks to get to the point that I'm at with it now, so once I pick it back up again, it should take 2 to 3 weeks to actually finish it. I'm not concerned about putting it away or putting it into hibernation. I'm not putting it away because I don't want to work on it. It's just that I have other projects that I want to prioritize over it, but I am excited to get back to it. As I said, the yarn feels really lovely to work with. I forgot to mention, I'm knitting it on 4mm needles, and they're my Knit Pro needles, which I haven't used in a while. They're like the laminated wooden ones, these ones. And it's a really nice knitting experience. Just this wool on these wooden needles, I'm really enjoying it. So I'm actually a little bit sad about putting it away because I'm going to miss it, but at least it means I have something to look forward to when I clear more projects from my needles. It could just be me, but I'm feeling like this episode is a bit disjointed. Like I feel like I can't really string a sentence together for some reason. Sometimes you just have days like that, you know? Maybe I haven't had enough coffee. But yeah, I apologise if I seem a bit all over the place. But anyway, my next whip is the Lyon Sweater by Petite Knit. And this pattern was also gifted to me. So a lot of gifted patterns in today's episode. I'm really glad that I get to use them. I don't like the idea of having patterns gifted to me and they just sit in my library. I do have a couple other patterns in my library, but they're very high on my priority list. So yeah, it is good to be able to actually use my gifted patterns. So thank you so much to the person who sent me this one. The Lyon Sweater is a contiguous jumper pattern by Petite Knit, and the pattern does have stripes that start kind of just above the split for sleeves, and they go all the way to the bottom, but I'm just doing it in this plain red colour. This is from Hedgehog Fibres, and it was they were kind of defective skeins. I got them for half price in the Hedgehog Fibre studio, and I don't really know what's wrong with them, but they were half price because they were defective. It's their merino iron base, so it's just 100% merino, and it's the colourway Sin, which is obviously a very bright orange red. This is like that orange red colour that people were obsessed with 2 years ago. I'm just a bit behind the trend. So yeah, I hadn't even started this in the last episode, and I've already split for sleeves. It's just been quite addictive to work on, I think, especially this yoke construction. I really felt like I just kept wanting to get to the next step of the yoke, and once I've split for sleeves, I actually think I lost a bit of motivation, which it's usually the other way around. I'm usually not motivated to do the yoke, and once I get to the body, it kind of flies off my needles. But with this one, once I got to the yoke, I kind of felt like I'd achieved something and I put it to the side, you know. But I will keep going with it. I am really motivated to keep working on this because of the decision I've made about what I'm going to do with the body. So basically, I was working on the yoke and I realised that I was running out of my first ball of yarn very quickly. And I have 6 balls of yarn. So I was like, am I going to have enough to finish this jumper? And I checked the meterage of the pattern and it calls for 1400 meters for my size. I have 900 meters. How did I start a project that I only have 2/3 of the amount of yarn that I need for it? How did I allow this to happen? Once I realised this, I was thinking, okay, I need to frog it and I need to find a different pattern because there's no way I'm going to finish this jumper with this amount of yarn. With Petite Knit patterns, I generally don't use the amount of yarn requested in the pattern. Like my Dagmar zipper sweater, she calls for 9 skeins. I used just over 7. And that's pretty significant as well. So part of me was thinking, maybe it's an exaggeration. Maybe I won't need that much yarn. So I went looking at other people's Ravelry projects, and the amount of yarn that people have used for my size, it varies a lot. Some people do get away with 950 meters or whatever it is that I have. Some people used 1600 meters or something. So it's really, really hard to tell. And I just decided I'll keep going with it, and worst comes to worst, I'll do stripes. Stripes will always save the day. And I was just a bit indifferent to doing stripes, but if that's what I needed to do to finish this jumper, that's what I was going to do. And I was thinking, okay, I guess I'll just do like white stripes. Okay, I'll do white stripes and I'll start them kind of halfway down the torso. And then I was like, why don't I make them more exciting? Let's do like purple stripes or blue stripes. Crazy, I know. And then I was thinking, and so I was going through all these colours in my head, trying to figure out what colour stripes I was going to do. And then I was like, why don't I do multiple different colour stripes? Wild, I know. So my plan, and I'm really excited about this now. That's why that's why I say I'm really enthusiastic about this, because I'm really excited to get to the point where I can work in these stripes. I am going to do 3 stripes, different colours, just like across the torso. And I'm also going to have each of those 3 colours represented in like the end of the cuff, the top of the collar, and the bottom of the hem. I know. It's crazy. Yeah, that's my plan, and I'm really excited for it now. And actually part of me is hoping that I don't have enough of the red yarn, because I would feel I don't think I would be justified in buying more yarn for this jumper if I actually do have enough of the red. So I'm kind of hoping that I actually don't have enough of the red. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. My ideas for the colours so far are like a purple. I can't decide if I want like a lilac or like a deeper purple. I think I want a deeper purple. Purple, and then like a pale yellow, and then a mint. Thoughts? Also open to other suggestions. I very crudely did a mock-up on Canva, and I'll pop it here. It has like the watermarks and everything because I don't have Canva Premium because I'm not bothered to pay for that. But I basically just got like a little jumper outline, and I just put a rectangle shape over the jumper, and I coloured the rectangles, and I did the 3 of them. And then I also did like, I added like a line on the cuff and like a curved line around the collar. But times like this, I kind of wonder if I should invest in a tablet or some kind of digital drawing device. I don't know anything about digital art, like nothing. My phone the screen's obviously too small, so I'm wondering if I should get just some kind of tablet, and it doesn't have to be an expensive one, just something with a very, very basic digital drawing tool. So if anyone has any recommendations for something like that, do let me know, because I think it would have turned out a lot better if I could have drawn a jumper outline myself instead of using this Canva one and awkwardly placing rectangles on top of it to represent stripes. It told me what I needed to know, so it's fine. So yeah, that's my plan for the colours. I'm really excited to get to that point where I can start working in those stripes. Until I get to that point, I'm going to be open-minded about the colours that I want to include in my stripes. I don't really want to include a white stripe. I feel like I kind of want to take advantage of this opportunity and go all out with colours. Someone asked me in the last video if I'm alternating skeins. I absolutely am, because as I said, these skeins are defective. Again, I don't know in what way, shape or form they're defective, but I will always alternate hand-dyed yarn when I can anyway. So especially in a circumstance like this where the yarn was half price for some reason, I'm definitely alternating it. So far it looks good. I finished my first ball up on the yoke pretty much, and then I'm working balls 2 and 3 basically from the neckline down. So from here down, I'm using like balls 2 and 3. And I think it looks okay so far. No obvious differences in skeins. I did make a mistake with the neckline. So you can see there are increases here. When I was working these increases, this is the part where you're working back and forth, obviously, before you join in the round. After I joined in the round, for some reason, I was just on autopilot and I kept increasing for the neck. I think I did 3 extra increases in the neckline. So I worked like, 6 rounds after joining in the round. And because you're increasing every other round, I had 3 extra increases on both sides of the neck. I didn't want to rip it back and redo it. So I ended up just dropping down the most recent increase I had done and accepting the fact that I had 2 extra increases on either side of the neckline. And then when it came time to doing the raglan increases here, I didn't do increases for the first 2 raglan rounds on the front. So the back and the front are supposed to be the same in terms of the raglan increases, but I just omitted the first 2 increases in the front raglan. So yeah, that is my Lyon sweater. Feels really nice to knit. It's a superwash wool on my Chow-Goo needles, so it just glides. Like, it's so smooth. Such a nice knitting experience. I know some people don't like superwash wool for that exact reason, but I like it. It just feels so smooth and mindless, and I don't have to look at it. It's just great. So yeah, really enjoying that project. So I have some acquisitions that I am blown away by. So over the moon to have received these. Like, I can't believe it. So as you probably know, I did a 5k giveaway recently and I announced the winners in the last episode. Those winners have reached out to me. I've sent the prizes out to them. So congratulations again to both of you. One of the winners, Melissa, she had obviously seen my last episode where I was talking about self-striping sock yarn and wondering where I can get some in Europe. And she said that she had some that she would like to send to me. So I couldn't believe it, that she was so kindly offering me, essentially a stranger, some yarn from her stash. Like, amazing. Of course I said that I would love that. It would make my day. I really only expected 1 skein. I did not expect her to send 5, but that's what she did. And when I tell you I nearly cried when I opened this package, like, I just could not believe the kindness. Oh my God, and the generosity. I feel so lucky to be on YouTube, to be part of this community. And I know people on YouTube say that, but, and it kind of, maybe it loses its meaning, but I really do mean that. Like, I cannot believe how lucky I am to be a part of this community and to have met the people that I've met through this hobby. And I feel like I might start crying because I'm just so overwhelmed, and really, really never thought that I would find myself in this position where I have a platform and I just talk to a camera and people are actually interested in hearing what I have to say, and that people like my content enough to want to send me things. I just can't believe it. So yeah, there aren't really any words to describe how grateful I am for you guys, for all of your support, and for people like Melissa who sent me yarn, and for people who have gifted me patterns from my wish list. I don't know what I did to deserve any of that, so thank you so much. Really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. But I will show you what she sent me. I don't know where to start. Okay, this one is from Tiny Human Knits, who I've heard of before, and even before I saw the label, I was like, I recognise that colourway. I think that's Tiny Human Knits, because I've seen it on Instagram a few times. And this colourway is called Carols in the Snow. So obviously a winter-based colourway, a winter-themed colourway. It's got blues and that lovely golden ochre yellow in there, and a pale pink as well. This is a 50-gram main skein with a 20-gram mini skein, and it's 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, 2-ply. So this is my favourite. I probably should have kept my favourite until last, but yeah, this is my favourite of the bunch. Next, this is from the Cozy Knitter, which is Canadian based, I guess. Yeah, made in Canada. And it's her Bliss base, so it's a fingering weight, 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. And this is an 85-gram main skein with a 30-gram mini skein, and the colourway is called Old Romance. So it's got these greens, pinks, and then the mini skein's a lovely steely grey colour. The next one is from Kirby Werby, and I looked her up on Instagram and I found this colourway, and turns out it's a Schitt's Creek themed colourway. I haven't seen Schitt's Creek, but I've heard great things about it. This colourway is called Old Farm Witches and Nom Nom for Us David. So I'm assuming the main skein is maybe Old Farm Witches and the mini skein is called Nom Nom for Us David. And I think it's a 10 stripe colourway, which is really cool. It's a 100-gram main skein with the 20-gram mini skein, 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon. The next one is unlabelled, so I don't know who it's by or where it's from, but it's a gradient sock yarn. There's 2 of these. So I haven't weighed them, but I assume they're 50 grams each, and obviously very kind of classic primary colours. Goes from red, orange, yellow, green, blue. So those would be really cool to knit up. Don't think I've knit with gradient yarn before, so that'll be fun. And then finally, this is another favourite. This is from Freckled Whimsy, and it's the 2022 Advent skein. I'm assuming the idea is that you knit 1 stripe a day during Advent. Oh, I'm just noticing it says 2 by 50 grams. So 2 separate 50 grams wound up in this, I guess. It's 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon, 4-ply fingering. And I actually really would like to try and knit this up this Advent. I did have plans to knit socks in December, but who says you can't knit 2 pairs of socks at the same time? So yeah, that's another favourite. So again, Melissa, thank you so much. I was just over the moon to receive this package. Just couldn't believe how lucky I was to receive this. A lot of these yarns are obviously very difficult for me to get because they're Canadian or American, and I could get them, but with shipping and customs is just astronomical cost. So it's just not worth it. And it's really, really cool to get to try them out. So thank you so much. I do want to just quickly talk about my next 2 plans. So at the moment I have 2 whips. I've got my Thru Lines shawl and I've got my Lyon Sweater. As I said, I'm putting my Nightlight shawl away for the moment because I want to cast on 2 projects next week. One of those is a pair of socks, and I'm going to be using these 2 yarns. If you've been here for a while, you might remember that I said I want to use, one of my goals for this year is to use any sock yarns that I got in 2024 within a year of purchasing them. So if I bought a sock yarn in August 2024, I wanted to use it up by August 2025. In the order that I got my sock yarns, this one is next. And I got it at Barcelona Knits last November. So I am ahead of schedule with this, but I don't think I'm going to achieve that goal anymore because I did get a sock set advent last December, which means that I do have at least 5 sock sets in my stash that need to be used by the end of December, and I just don't know if that's achievable. I don't think that's achievable, but it's still a good goal to have because it keeps me motivated to use these yarns instead of just neglecting them and using more exciting, newer sock yarns instead. Like I am still thinking about, I got this yarn in December, how can I use it? What's the plan for it, you know? So it's a good goal to have still, even though I'm not going to achieve it. This, as I said, I got Barcelona Knits. It's from Sock Una Troca, and they were my favourite stall at Barcelona Knits. I'm not going this year, and I don't know who's vending, but if you are going, and if they are vending, definitely have a look. They had such a cool stall. They had all of their sock colourways in 50-gram skeins as well as 100-gram skeins, but for me, 50-gram skeins are amazing because if I use a contrast heel and toe, I only use 50 grams of sock yarn. So I have a lot of sock yarns in my stash that I have like 45 grams left of, and it's a bit frustrating because I don't know what to do with them. My plan for them is to eventually make another pair of socks, like maybe a shorty pair of socks or whatever I can get out of them, and gift them. But it is a bit frustrating being left with that awkward amount of sock yarn left over, whereas with this, I'll use the whole skein. So because this is a 50-gram skein, I'm going to make these socks toe up. I'm going to start with a Judy's Magic cast on. I'd like to be able to use the whole 50 grams, but because I'm doing a contrast heel and toe, I might use like a little bit less, maybe 40 to 45 grams. But anyway, the contrast colour is from one of my homespun house sock sets. I used the main skein already last year, and this is just the mini left over from that sock set. And I find this funny because when I used that main skein and I paired it with a different contrast colour and I was left with this mini skein, I was like, okay, now I need to get a main colour to make with this, which is just absurd to me now because I have a lot of mini skeins now and I would never dream of buying a main colour to knit with them because I'll always find a use now. I have so many sock yarns now that if I want to knit contrast heel, cuff and toes, I have enough minis to choose from that I can do that. So the idea of buying extra sock yarn just for the purpose of using up a mini skein seems a bit silly to me now. But anyway, that's what I did. I paired these together. I bought this yarn specifically to hold with this one. So yeah, that's my next sock plan. And then brace yourself, I'm about to say the C word. I am going to start my Christmas jumper next week. I'm going to be knitting the Holly Sweater by Pernille Larsen of Knitting for Olive, and I've been wanting to knit that jumper for 2 years and I just kept putting it off. And then the Christmas gone, Christmas 2024 was my first Christmas in my current workplace, and they have Christmas jumper day, which I didn't have in my last workplace. And everyone, all my colleagues know that I knit. So when I came in on Christmas jumper day with my commercial Christmas jumper and they all asked me if I'd knit it, I felt like I was letting them all down when I said no. So I need to go in with a hand knit Christmas jumper this year. So I'm going to make the Holly Sweater. This yarn I also got in New Zealand. Can you see a theme? This is Wild Earth Yarns Aspen 8 ply, which is 100% Polworth. The main colour is the colour Marble. The green colour is the colour Emerald. And for the berries, I'm going to be using the Brushtail Merino Possum in the colour Red. And if you missed the last episode, like that's why I cast on that shawl, because I wanted to make sure that I had enough of this to finish the shawl before I used it to make the berries of the Holly Sweater. But I definitely do have enough, so I'm going to start this next week. I'm really excited. It's another colourwork yoke. I've heard mixed reviews about the colourwork on this in terms of the difficulty, especially because I think there's long floats between the berries or something. I'm not sure. I need to look into it, and yeah, but I'm really excited to cast this on, even though I know it's early days. I'm sure as knitters you all understand. So that is everything for today. Thank you so much for watching. I can't believe I managed to sit here for 2 hours. Oh my god, it's been 2 hours. Wow, I've been recording for nearly 2 hours. Can't believe I've managed to sit here in this jumper because it has gotten a little bit warmer, but I'm actually okay. I usually overheat very quickly, but I feel fine. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're working on. All the projects that I talked about will be linked in the description box in terms of the Ravelry project pages and also the pattern pages and the yarns that I used. Everything will always be in the description box below. But if you have any other questions, do feel free to ask them in the comments. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.